Yes, is it audible now, sir?
Wonderful, wonderful.
1 minute. I'll switch off the laptop and get connected to the mobile phone.
Right. We are live to the world. Welcome to Dr. TSPR show. I am Dr. Tangella Shivaprasad Reddy alias Dr. TSPR. Namaste, Adab, hello. A proud moment for every Indian, and I am privileged to host one of the India's greatest political scientist, Professor Dr. Rajurkar. Alongside we have Dr. Vijaya Kalyani, who heads Padal Ram Reddy Law College. Why I say I am privileged? It is simple. Our identity is our freedom struggle. The freedom struggle, the moment we say freedom struggle, that becomes the spirit of the constitution, because of which we are all here enjoying everything. But of late, people are becoming fearful, not able to understand why. For that reason, our first citizen of India to the first citizen of Panchayat, they all take oath on the great constitution. Right from Prime Minister to Chief Minister, everyone takes oath on the constitution. What is it? And what is the spirit behind this constitution? No one can explain it better than Professor Rajurkar, and that is why I say I am privileged and I am very happy, and I play my salutes to my parents, my family, and also to my guru, great Professor K. Purushottam Reddy, who has allowed me to host Professor Rajurkar, and it is his mastermind. I again sincerely salute you all, the patriotic Indians, along with my guru and everyone. Let me introduce the great guest of today. He is Dr. N.G. Rajurkar, Professor Emeritus, Department of Political Science, Osmania University. Qualifications MA, LLB, PhD, and D.Lit. Positions held: Head Department of Political Science, Osmania University, Chairman Board of Studies of Political Science, Osmania University. Area of specialization: India's movement for freedom, with special reference to Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. This is the moment for us. Is this going to transform India? Yes, many people are eagerly waiting to hear Professor Rajurkar. Then doctoral thesis, Nehru's ideas on nationalism, democracy and socialism. Had lengthy interviews with Nehru in connection with his doctoral thesis. He is the one and only one. Record as a university teacher, taught political science to graduate and postgraduate students for more than 3 decades, supervised the research work of several MPhil and PhD scholars, authored several books and research papers, and even my guru, the great Professor K. Purushottam Reddy, is one amongst them and is the only one amongst them. Community activities: regularly invited as a speaker to public functions, seminars, and symposia in India for the last 4 decades, and to similar programs in USA for the last 2 decades. Delivered Dr. B.R. Ambedkar memorial lectures on India's movement for freedom before the members of Indian Parliament and other dignitaries at Parliament Annex C, New Delhi in December 1991. Sri Shivraj Patil, the then Speaker of the Lok Sabha, presided over the lecture series. What a moment, what a moment. Presided over a panel discussion on Nehru in an international seminar at California State University, Northridge in June 1988. Delivered several lectures at various American universities and important academic centers during his subsequent visits to the United States in the years 1993, 1995, 2000, 2002, 2006, 2007, and 2008. Committees served: President of India's nominee on the Social Sciences Selection Committee of Central University of Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi for 3 years. Member of the Standing Committee of UGC on Buddha, Gandhi and Nehru. Member of the selection committees of several Indian universities for selecting political science lecturers, readers and professors. Chairman of the committee constituted to choose the Vice Chancellor of the Kota University in Rajasthan 2011. Awards received: Best Teachers Award of the AP Government 1991, Bharatiya Sanskrit Nirmal Parishad Award 2002, Jeevan Gaurav Puraskar on behalf of Brihan Maharashtra Parishad 2006, Maharshi Vittal Ramji Award by the Government of Maharashtra for his Marathi book Pratibimba 2010, the late so Padmini Ban Jeevan Gaurav Puraskar Nanded 2011, recipient of the degree of Doctor of Literature by the Punjab University of Patiala 2010, author of several books on political science, history and literature in English and Marathi, have presented several papers in national and international seminars. Apart from the books in English and Marathi, have written articles in Urdu too. Additionally, have written books on the following subjects too: political history of the Marathas, the history of, because I am reiterating, political history of the Marathas. There was a movie also which was made which could not survive the heat of the criticism. So that is why I am trying to bring out all his history, what he has been, why he has come to lecture us today. The history of Qutub Shahi and Asaf Jahi rulers of Hyderabad. The struggle for civil liberties in the erstwhile state of Hyderabad. Implications of a common civil code in India. Articles on Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Mahadev Govind Ranade, Dayanand Saraswati, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, Lala Lajpat Rai, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, all articles on them. Dadabhai Naoroji's drain theory, the Vande Matra movement of 1905, Tilak as a political leader, and many such topics. Books authored: have written 10 books in Marathi and 12 in English. Latest book is entitled Nehru Utopian or a Statesman, published by Pentagon Press, New Delhi. Languages: he is a versatile personality. Besides English, Urdu, Hindi and Marathi, have a working knowledge of Persian and familiar with the poetry of Sheikh Sadi, Hafiz and Omar Khayyam. What great way to invite you to this special program, and I am privileged, sir. Kindly go ahead, address the people now. They are all waiting, whether they are your students or people across cutting the borders of the states, and the globe also is waiting for your lecture, sir. Kindly go ahead, and also I'll say a few words about Dr. P. Vijaya Kalyani. She is the principal, Padal Ram Reddy Law College, a lady dynamite. Her special interests are in environmental law and international law. I'm thankful to both of you. First, Professor Rajurkar, kindly give the inaugural lecture on the Constitution of India, freedom struggle and Constitution of India.
Dr. Siva Prasad Reddy, Dr. Vijaya Kalyani, and the listeners. At the very outset, I would like to thank Dr. Siva Prasad Reddy for the opportunity that he has given me to speak on India's freedom movement this morning. I am here reminded of 7 lectures that I had delivered on India's freedom movement about 2 decades back. In those 7 lectures, I tried to cover every possible event associated with India's movement for freedom. At this moment, I consider it my duty to thank Dr. K. Purushottam Reddy, who was my student, later on my colleague in the Department of Political Science, and now a person of great eminence in the field of environment, because we have taken the trouble of arranging those 7 lectures. Right now, my problem is somewhat different. I can't possibly cover every part of India's freedom movement in one lecture. What I will try to do would be to give a bird's eye view of India's freedom movement with a bearing on, direct or indirect bearing on the Constitution of India. To begin with, I will start with the manner in which the British came to our country. I am here reminded of a poem that I had read as a student of the primary school. The title of the poem was The Camel's Nose. This poem deals with a story related to a camel and a shopkeeper. Of course, an imaginary one. On a very cold evening in London, a camel came to a certain shop and he requested the shopkeeper to push its nose through the window because it was very, very cold outside. The innocent shopkeeper, similar to the people of India, agreed to it. The camel pushed its nose through the window. Then the neck came inside. Then the front legs. Then the hind legs. The camel got into the shop and said to the shopkeeper, Mr. Shopkeeper, I don't really solicit your presence in this shop. If you want, you may walk out. I propose to stay here. That was the manner in which the British came to our country as shopkeepers, as traders, and before we realized as to what was happening, the entire country was under their rule. Now this was how the British came to our country. What were the consequences? When the British came to our country, certain consequences followed, and I shall refer to them one after the other. The first thing that I would like to refer to is the 1857 rebellion by the Indian people. But before that, I must point out that the Marathas were defeated by the British in 1818. The British defeated the Sikhs in 1849. And for all practical purposes, the entire India came under the British rule by 1849. Our reaction in the beginning was not happy. We had lost our power. We had lost our privileges. And so, in 1857, we made a great effort to drive out the British from we call it the first war of independence. N.G.Rajurkar called it the first war of independence. The Great Mutiny. After we were defeated, repression followed on the part of the British, and as they say, every person associated with the rebellion was hanged from the nearest tree. This was a great shock to the Indian people. It was in 1857 that the East India Company was brought to an end, and the Queen of England, Queen Victoria, started ruling over the country. The first thing that Queen Victoria did was she made an announcement to the effect that we shall treat Indians on par. We will give them what they want to. All that they have to do is follow constitutional methods. I will go a little back and talk about 1857. In the year 1857, the year of our uprising, 3 universities were started in India, one at Calcutta, one at Bombay, and one at Madras. Our students studied in those universities, and these students imbibed the ideas of John Stuart Mill, James Mill, Herbert Spencer, to some extent Karl Marx. They imbibed the idea of freedom from the great poet Milton's ideas on liberty. So we were greatly influenced by the Western ideas, our young people who went to these 3 universities. In the year 1957, we had seminars all over India vis-a-vis what happened in the year 1857. And a very interesting subject was debated. The subject was, what was the starting point of India's nationalism? And various viewpoints were expressed. Some people said the starting point of India's nationalism was the period of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, the 18th and 19th century patriot, philosopher, and civil agitator, because he gave us the idea of fighting the British with constitutional methods. He was the champion of individual freedom. He banned the sati system. He brought about important changes in the Indian judiciary. So some people said that the starting point should be Raja Ram Mohan Roy's period. A few others said that the starting point should be 1857, the year in which we made a desperate attempt to end the British rule, which unfortunately did not succeed. The third viewpoint was the starting point of Indian nationalism was the year 1885, the year in which the Indian National Congress was brought into existence. But one very interesting and instructive viewpoint was the starting point was 1857 itself, not so much because of our uprising, which was certainly very important, but for the fact that 3 universities were started in India, because these universities produced the future leaders of India's freedom movement. So this is the background that we have to take into account. The Indian National Congress came into existence in 1885 in the month of December. But before I talk about Indian National Congress and what it did, I would like to draw the attention of the listeners to what happened when Queen Victoria's rule started. This rule resulted in some good things for the people of India, what Jawaharlal Nehru calls in the Discovery of India as the unintended good results of the British rule over India. The British put an end to the Thugs and the Pindaris, who were a great source of nuisance, and because of them, traveling became a great risk, because they used to attack the travelers and take away everything from them and murder them. The British put an end to them. Secondly, the British saw to it that certain important steps were taken. One, newspapers were started, and newspapers gave the opportunity of the people to know as to what was going on in India as well as in the entire world. Thirdly, the railway trains started in the year 1858, which made it possible for people to move from one part of India to the other. The mobility of the people increased greatly. All these things resulted in a feeling amongst the people of India that after all, the British are not that bad. Well, we have lost our freedom. India is no longer under our control, but the British in a way are proving a blessing in disguise. Sometimes in life, certain things happen which apparently look as unfortunate, but later on they prove to be beneficial. And that was the view that was taken by the leaders of the Indian National Congress in the beginning. A few minutes earlier, I made a reference to the fact that the Indian National Congress came into existence in December 1885. The person who started this organization was an Irishman known as Sir Octave Hume. We need not go into the question as to what prompted Sir Octave Hume to start this organization. There are various interpretations about that, but one accepted view is that Sir Octave Hume was a friend of India. He wanted the people of India to go ahead and get rights of their own, and therefore he took the initiative in starting this great organization. I called it a great organization, and certainly proved to be so, but it may interest you to know that only 72 persons attended the first session of the Indian National Congress in Bombay. Delegates from different parts of India, numbering only to 72. So sometimes people blame the moderate group people for being too docile. But this has to be remembered that we were not in a position to challenge the British authority in 1885. We couldn't have said in 1885 what we said in 1942 August, quit India, leave India, because our strength had greatly increased by that time. So the moderates, taking into consideration the objective set of circumstances, developed a philosophy which runs as follows. Firstly, they believed in the good intentions of the British, and understandably so, because the atmosphere in England at that time was dominated by a philosophy known as liberalism. The liberals believed in individual rights, the liberals believed in freedom, the liberals believed in constitutional concessions. So naturally, the moderates thought that the British are well-intentioned people and they will do good to us. So the good intentions of the British was the starting point. Secondly, they believed in adopting constitutional methods in order to get their grievances satisfied. And that was what the Queen wanted. Follow constitutional methods and we shall give you whatever you want. By constitutional methods, it was meant the approach of petition and prayer. It was meant to introduce bills in the legislatures of Indian polity, or introducing bills in the central legislature, known as the Supreme Legislature of India. So moderate followed this policy of petition and prayer, and they succeeded in some measure. Certain demands that were made by them from time to time were accepted by the British, and the moderates were reasonably happy about that. Before I proceed, I would like to make a mention of something which I consider important. I will go on referring to the Indian National Congress from the beginning to the end. So please remember that at that point of time, Indian National Congress was another name of India's aspirations. Later on, Indian National Congress became almost identical to the aspirations of India's people, because all great leaders, right from Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Gokhale, Dadabhai Naoroji, to Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, Vallabhbhai Patel, and of course Mahatma Gandhi were a part of the Indian National Congress. So when I talk about Congress, please remember that I have that particular Congress in mind.
Yes.
And no other Congress.
Okay.
I hope you understand what I am saying.
Right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the moderates put forward very reasonable demands, and they were in the good books of the British for the first 3 or 4 years. Whenever the session took place, the governor of that province invited the members of the Congress party to a tea party. So the relations were very friendly. The British were happy with the moderates. The British were happy with the Indian National Congress. But gradually, another set of people came to the political scene insofar as the Indian National Congress was concerned, and this group was known as the group of the extremists. What did they represent? The extremists did not believe that the rule of the British over India was a blessing. They thought that it was a curse. They did not believe in constitutional methods. They said, well, we shall follow constitutional methods to the extent to which it's possible. Otherwise, we shall adopt extra constitutional methods also, because they believed that Britain was essentially an imperialist power and was not interested in doing good to the people of India, but wanted to exploit the conditions in India. I'm here reminded of the very innocent way in which British rule was explained and justified by some people. They used to say, it is a white man's burden. It is the moral responsibility of the British to rule over India so that we may make them more civilized, so that we may make more culture. So it is the moral responsibility that we have undertaken, and once the Indian people become civilized and cultured and educated, our job would be over, and then we shall leave India. Had that been so, a struggle in India under the leadership of Bal Gangadhar Tilak and later on Mahatma Gandhi would not have been necessary. Evidently, the British had come to India to exploit India and to take advantage of the rule over India, and that was something which the extremists believed in. So they said, to some extent, constitutional methods, but beyond that, we shall do whatever is necessary. So let us try to understand the extremist point of view, because I am giving it in a nutshell so that I need not go in details about the moderate leaders and the extremist leaders, because the canvas that I have to cover is fairly wide. What did the extremists stand for? Number one, they said the British rule over India is a curse. Number two, they did not wholly believe in the constitutional methods. Number three, the moderates used to say that in our program, social reformation would come first and political changes would come next. The extremists said, no, it's not necessary. For instance, Tilak once said, I don't believe that social reformation should come first. He gave the example of three countries. One, Ireland. Two, Burma. Three, Sri Lanka. He said these were politically advanced countries and yet they were politically backward, which means that there is no direct link, no direct connection between social reformation and political changes, and therefore political changes should come first. Once we change politically, we shall take care of our social problems because we would have the authority to do so. So this was basically the approach of the extremists, and they were of course educated people. They too had studied John Stuart Mill, Adam Smith, Herbert Spencer, Karl Marx, and many other political thinkers, John Ruskin, but they were only partially influenced by them. They thought that the basis of our nationalism should not be what James Mill has to say or what John Stuart Mill has to say. Our inspiration should be from India's past. And India's past was a glorious one, and we need not develop inferiority complex of our past. Let us build up the whole structure of national movement on India's glorious past. So that was the viewpoint of the extremists who came on the political scene in 1905. What was it that made the extremists very powerful in the year 1905. Till then, more or less, the moderates were influencing the, the Indian National Congress. Something very extraordinary happened which helped the extremists greatly, and that was the partition of Bengal in 1905. Before that, the people of India did what it was expected of them to do. They submitted petitions to the government. They submitted memoranda to the government. They met the governor of Bengal. They sent memoranda to the Queen of England. That is, they followed all constitutional methods. They held big meetings in which resolutions were passed, and the resolutions were passed on the Bengal government and to the Queen. But in spite of all these petitions, in spite of all these requests, in spite of adopting constitutional methods, the British went ahead with the partition of Bengal. And partition of Bengal was brought about in August or September 1905. This gave a psychological advantage to the extremists. He said, you were saying all this time that we have great faith in the British and that if we put forward our case in a proper manner, in a constitutional manner, the British will yield to our demands. But no, we were proved right. We have been saying all along that British will accept your demands or our demands only when till it suits them, and when something uncomfortable happens for them, they will just ignore these constitutional methods. So the extremists came on the political scene. The moderates lost much of their ground, and the topmost leader of the extremist group was Bal Gangadhar Tilak. The other leaders were Aurobindo, who later on gave up politics and became a great sage of India and settled down in Pondicherry. Then Bipin Chandra Pal, the great leader from Bengal, and yet another great man, this time from Punjab, Lala Lajpat Rai. These people led the movement against the partition of India, partition of Bengal, but as ill luck would have it, they did not succeed, and they went ahead with the partition of Bengal. Bengal was admittedly the biggest province of India. 1/4 of India's population lived in Bengal. So the British were not that way not wrong in partitioning the country, because the unit was very, very unwieldy. But what was objectionable was the manner in which they brought about the partition of Bengal. Now confidential reports are available, which were not available to us earlier. In these confidential reports, it has been specifically stated that the partition of Bengal is being brought about in order to kill Indian nationalism. These secret reports say that Bengal was the center of anti-British activity. All hot-headed revolutionaries are in Bengal, and if we have to break the neck of the revolutionaries, if we have to break the back of the revolutionaries, what we have to do is to partition the country, partition Bengal. But by partitioning Bengal, they did something important from their point of view, disastrous from our point of view. They divided Bengal in such a way that two provinces were created, one with a Hindu-dominated Congress, one Hindu-dominated population, the other with a Muslim-dominated population, consistent with their policy of divide and rule. Because they believed that we would be in a position to rule over India only if we succeed in dividing the people in different groups. So the extremists came in their own, and ultimately the British had to annul the partition of Bengal, and the year was 1911. So the extremists became extremely popular all over India. The photographs of Bal Gangadhar Tilak and others dominated every nook and corner of India, and from that period onwards, the extremists were on the forefront up to 1920, the year in which Mahatma Gandhi dominated the Indian political scene. So something, a little of Bal Gangadhar Tilak. I have given the broad outlines vis-a-vis what they stood for. Bal Gangadhar Tilak was imprisoned thrice, something which was not usual during that period. In fact, he was the first political leader to go to prison for a political cause. The first imprisonment came in 1882, the second in 1897, and the third in 1908. Something about the last imprisonment. The governor of Bombay, as it was known then, was one Mr. Sidnam. There is in Bombay, now known as Mumbai, a college known as the Sidnam College of Commerce. The name of the governor was given to that college. And if I may make a slight digression, my father studied in the Sidnam College at the beginning of the 20th century, and I'm proud to say that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was his student, was his teacher. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and K.T. Shah, who made a great name as an economist, they taught my father. Now this was just a digression. The point that I'm trying to drive home is the fact that the British had come to the conclusion that they should follow a policy of divide and rule and make and create several divisions in India so that they can perpetuate their rule over India. Now talking about Bal Gangadhar Tilak's imprisonments, and he was an extraordinarily courageous person, and his ambition was to go to the masses and create discontent in them. The starting point was Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and later on Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi made the entire country or the entire agitation a mass-oriented agitation. Gandhiji started where Tilak ended. I would like to talk something about 2 or 3 things about Tilak. One, his imprisonment in 1908. The then governor of Bombay as it was called earlier, he wrote a confidential letter to the British government in which he stated that this man knows all our weak points. He knows where we are going wrong. And if he is allowed to remain free, if he is not sent to prison, he will bring about a revolution in the country and we shall have to quit India with our bag and baggage. So this man should be taught a lesson and should be sent to prison. And the British were waiting for an opportunity, and at that time Tilak used to edit 2 periodicals, one Kesari in Marathi, second Maratha in English. And in the periodical Kesari, Tilak wrote an article, editorial, The Misfortune of the Country. Now the irony is, this article was not written by Tilak, but one of his collaborators. The British were waiting for an opportunity, and they filed a case against him that he is preaching sedition against the British government, and therefore he should be charged with the allegation of sedition. The trial continued for a long time, and it ended on the 22nd of August 1908. Tilak defended himself He did not allow anybody else to defend himself. And can you believe that he spoke for 21 hours in about 5 days' time, 4 to 5 hours a day, defending himself, quoting from sedition trials in England and other places, and pointing out that whatever I had stated in the article did not amount to sedition. But the British were bent upon sending him to prison, and the jury also was told about what the outcome should be. The jury consisted of 7 persons, 5 Englishmen, and 2 Indians. The jury went for discussion on the 22nd of August, and they came out after an hour, and their verdict was Mr. Tilak is guilty of sedition. The 2 Indians said Mr. Tilak is not guilty. The other 5, the Englishmen, they said Mr. Tilak is guilty. The judge was one Mr. Davar, who was already instructed to give a very severe punishment to Bal Gangadhar Tilak. But the judge said, Mr. Tilak, have you anything to say now in your defense? And Tilak said something very important, worth remembering, which has been engraved in the room where Tilak's trial took place. And the words that Tilak uttered were, despite the verdict of the jury, I maintain that I am innocent. There are greater powers than the courts of law that decide the destiny of individuals and nations. And it may be the will of the providence that the cause that I espouse may prosper more by my imprisonment rather than by my remaining free. These were the historic words. When Justice Chagla became the Chief Justice of Mumbai High Court, he saw to it that these words were engraved in the very room where Tilak's trial took place. And Tilak was sent to Mandale, and the sentence was 6 years rigorous imprisonment. Tilak was 52 years old, suffering from acute diabetes. All these things were not taken into account, and he was sent to Mandale, the capital of Upper Burma. Now here one interesting thing to which I would like to make a mention is that a great Sanskrit scholar, German scholar, Max Muller, was greatly influenced by the writings of Tilak. Tilak was a great Sanskrit scholar. He brought pressure on the British government, and he said it's not fair. Tilak is a great scholar in his own right. He knows more about Sanskrit than most others. So the imprisonment should be converted into simple imprisonment, and that was done. It was here that Tilak wrote, when he was in prison, Gita Rahasya, which has been translated almost in every Indian language. Much later, when Burma came under the control of Subhash Chandra Bose, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose visited Mandale just in order to see the place where Tilak was imprisoned, and he was greatly surprised at the fact that Tilak could write such a great book full of learning in a climate that was most unsuitable for writing a scholarly book. Now Tilak, the one more thing that I would like to talk about, because I have a large ground to cover. After his release in 1914, Tilak started what was called the Home Rule League, that India should have Swaraj. He used to say that nothing short of Swaraj, nothing short of self-rule will satisfy India's aspirations, and saying that at that point of time was a matter of great courage. Two Home Rule Leagues were started in 1916, one by Lokmanya Tilak and the other by Mrs. Annie Besant, and most of the people uh, became members of the Home Rule League. Tilak traveled from place to place, from village to village, and he brought to the people the message of Home Rule. I will just make mention of one more thing before I switch over to something else. In 1897, a great famine took place in Maharashtra, at that time the Bombay province. And the British rulers were used to exploit the ignorance of the Indian peasants. There was a law, a statute to the effect that if the yield is less than 5 annas in a rupee, then levy need not be collected from the farmers. A great famine had taken place, but the British took advantage of the ignorance of the people and started collecting levy from the poor, illiterate Indian peasants. And then Tilak came to the scene. He went from village to village, educated the people about the book statute on the law book, told them that legally you are not bound to pay the levy this year because the yields are less than 5 annas per rupee. And he said, if the Britishers come or if their officers come, don't worry, just say, we shall not pay levy, come what may, and I shall come to your rescue. And that was how, for the first time in India, the common people rebelled against the British. They refused to pay the levy, and that was how the mass movement began. Tilak passed away on the 1st of August 1920. He passed away in Bombay, as it was known at that time. The next day, the funeral procession began, and it was 3.5 miles long. Everybody joined. As Jawaharlal Nehru said in his autobiography, we felt as if the entire Bombay was attending the funeral procession. It was raining, and yet nobody left the funeral procession. The last point that I would like to say about Tilak was great Muslim leaders were his admirers, in spite of the fact that he had started the Ganapati festival, in spite of the fact that he had started the Shivaji festival. Of course, he gave the explanations which satisfied the Muslims. For Shivaji festival, he said, well, Shivaji festival should be celebrated because he was a great leader who had concern for everyone in Maharashtra, whether he was a Muslim or Hindu. Tilak also pointed out in that statement that Shivaji used to give strict instructions to his soldiers not to damage a mosque or a church whenever Shivaji's soldiers captured a new area, and to honor women. If somebody dishonored women, his legs and hands were cut down. So Tilak said in his statement that we must admire such a person, somebody who can inspire us and take us towards the secular ideal. So I was talking to you about the last day and the funeral of Tilak, and on that very day, Mahatma Gandhi started the non-cooperation movement in Mumbai itself. It was as if one sun had set and another sun had come on the horizon. And from here onwards, we come to what we know as the Gandhian era. I will take a break for about 10 minutes and then resume.
Wonderful, sir. Wonderful. Beautifully said. Relax, sir. Meanwhile, we will discuss You just relax for some time, and then Dr. Vijaya Kalyani garu,
Yes, sir.
can you just switch on your video?
Yes, sir, I'll do that.
Yeah, madam.
Yes, sir.
What can we say? It's spellbound.
Absolutely, sir. It's a very great enlightening moment and a matter of great honor for me to be here on the platform which you have provided. I congratulate you on this occasion for taking up this lectures on the Constitution of India and launching it with an eminent orator par excellence and who has been delivering lectures in the Parliament, Professor Rajurkar Garu. And it's a great honor to listen to him. The glimpse of the entire freedom struggle is visible in his one lecture at a go. I think something what he has attempted at, I have never heard before. It is amazing to hear that Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who is the major freedom fighter, has spoken for 21 hours, and we all were ignorant of such great attempts that were made by our freedom fighters. Now, I would like to tell you about my connection with this constitution and the spread of legal education. I would like to inform you that the institution that I belong to, Padala Ramireddy Law College, is a pioneer private law college in the region of Telangana. And the respected correspondent, sir, Shri Padala Ramireddy Garu, and the secretary, Shri P. Srinivasa Reddy, sir, have authored books more than 100. And they translated the Constitution of India into Telugu language so that the access reaches all people who are not able to read it in English. And we are spreading the legal education by organizing various legal aid camps since 1988 when we have established this institute. So this connection makes me much more relevant to this platform in sharing my humble views on this particular auspicious movement where you are launching the lectures. The echoes of our freedom fighters move our spirits to think about the glory of our nation. Their indomitable efforts for freedom has brought our generation the life of comfort that we are now enjoying. The need of the hour for the students and every citizen of the country is to realize the spirit that lies behind the freedom that we are enjoying. To start off, this lecture with freedom struggle is a great initiative. I appreciate your efforts for that. And I would like to start with saying by Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation, who said, an education which doesn't teach us to discriminate between good and bad, to assimilate the one and exclude the other, is a misnomer. As rightly said by Mahatma Gandhi ji, who is the torchbearer of our freedom struggle, the education that we are right now having is, I would say, not so complete, with a little bit of addition of freedom struggle. Our generations will connect to the spirit of democracy, secularism, justice, liberty, fraternity that are encompassed and a part and parcel of our constitution. The ideals for which the freedom fighters have struggled, the connectivity is lost somewhere. So we need to understand that in a country like United Kingdom, sir was telling in an enlightening manner about the goodness of the British rule. I agree with sir in a very humble manner because I always start on a positive note when I take my any kind of lecture with my students. I tell about the Britishers. The rule started off on the positive note of uniting India and also opening up our window towards knowledge. The spirit of ideals like democracy were initiated in the minds of our freedom fighters through the curriculum of the British education which was provided. That is the impact of education, which is inbuilt in every citizen. So the education carries so much of weight. Knowledge carries so much of weight. It's not only a right to know constitution, it's our duty to know constitution. I believe that the younger generation feels it's a duty to know constitution. Unless we know these ideals, which are there in part and parcel of our constitution, we will never be able to know the ideals for which they have been introduced to us. Um, the Britishers in United Kingdom has introduced in 2014 the curriculum in which India's freedom struggle is a part and parcel of. So we can understand the importance that India's freedom struggle has traveled worldwide. Now it's our duty when we are talking about this is the right time actually. The COVID situation is the right time where we are talking about change of syllabus. We are talking about getting much more acquainted with our own culture, our own heritage. The government is making so many efforts towards that. One of the most important efforts I would appreciate is declaring November 26th as Constitution Day. So you have started off an auspicious month, sir. August. August 15 is an Independence Day. August 8 is the Quit India Movement Day. So this holds a lot of relevance towards launching of these lectures.
Yeah, I think
So observing May
Vijay
Constitution Day,
Kalyani
yes,
garu.
sir.
I think our sir is back when you said it is so auspicious to
Yes,
launch
sir.
this lecture. Wonderful. So I
Thank you.
want him to
Yes, sir.
continue the travails of freedom
Thank
struggle and how, when the rights were suppressed, regroup, understand, and you as you rightly said, educate to make people to understand, and then fight for ourselves what is good, what is right. That is what all is about. So, I'll,
Yes.
now let us listen to him, the
Thank-
next part. And
Sure, absolutely.
can you just, this audio of your mobile also, if you can just,
make it louder.
no, not you, sir, not you, sir, the other one, the mobile. I'm talking about Dr. Kalyani's. Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Prasad Reddy
Sir,
and Madam Principal, for your generous comments. Before I start talking about Gandhiji, a colossal figure, an all-time great, I would like to get back to the earlier period for two reasons. I would like to explain more about the moderates and their philosophy. I had stated at the beginning of my lecture that the moderates believed in constitutional methods, they had faith in the British, in their intentions, and they worked very well on in that domain. But I would like to make a mention of two out of the ordinary leaders belonging to the moderate group. The greatness was not restricted to these two only, but because of time constraints, I shall talk only about two. One, Dadabhai Naoroji, the great Parsi leader. He was born in 1885 and he died in 1917 at the ripe old age of 1993. He was called the Grand Old Man of India. He graduated from the Bombay University in 1852. Later on, he went to England in connection with a business proposition, and he spent a large number of years in England itself. He was called the unofficial ambassador of India in England.
Sir, your sound.
Mahatma Gandhi writes at one place,
Yeah.
when I was going to England, hello,
Yeah. In
Mahatma Gandhi
Yeah.
once said that when I was proceeding to England for my law studies, I was a bit nervous. I did not know who to contact. I met a doctor in Mumbai who knew Dadabhai Naoroji. I said to him, will you please give me a letter of introduction to Dadabhai Naoroji so that he may help me? The answer of that learned doctor was, no introduction letter is necessary. All that you have to do is go to Dadabhai Naoroji, meet him and tell him that you have come from India. He will help you in every possible way. So that was Dadabhai Naoroji. Dadabhai Naoroji developed two things for which some sort of a mention is absolutely necessary. Firstly, he founded in England two institutions. One was known as the Indian Society, the second, the East India Society. The intention of Dadabhai Naoroji was to educate the English people in regard to the aims and aspirations of the Indian people. By and large, the ordinary English people were ignorant about what the aspirations of the Indian people were. They believed in all those stories about elephants moving in the city of Bombay and sadhu performing a rope trick. They did not know what the Indians really stood for. So these two organizations, the Indian Society and the East India Society, through them Dadabhai Naoroji educated the people of England in regard to the aims and aspirations of the Indian people, and by and large the English people became more sympathetic to the cause of the aspirations of the India's peoples because of the efforts made by Dadabhai Naoroji. So that was a great work that Dadabhai Naoroji did. Here I may point out that our leaders believed in what is called an additional dimension to India's movement for freedom. That was done by Dadabhai Naoroji. That was also done by Jawaharlal Nehru, by Lokmanya Tilak and Gandhiji also. Because we wanted the support and sympathy of other countries. Primarily our intention was to get the support of the English people for India's cause of freedom. Later on, we widened our scope and tried to get the sympathy of other nations too. So I was talking about Dadabhai Naoroji and the two organizations that he started in London. The second important thing that Dadabhai Naoroji did was what is called the drain theory. Till then, the general feeling in India was that the British rule was a blessing, that nothing was wrong with the British people, that the intentions were good. Dadabhai Naoroji himself belonged to that group, but he felt that he should point out the drawbacks of the British rule also. In the year 1873, he gave evidence before a committee of the British government, House of Commons, known as the Fawcett Committee. Mr. Fawcett was the chairman of that committee, and he was entrusted with the task of going into the relationship, financial relationship between England and India. Dadabhai Naoroji gave evidence before that committee, and through that very scholarly evidence, he tried to prove that the British people were very unfair to Indians, that money got drained away from India to England because of the British policies. A large number of money collected from Indian taxpayers was spent on pensions to the British officers who had stayed in India earlier. A big army was maintained by the British, again with the help of Indian taxpayers' money, and that British army, Indian army, was entrusted with the work of defending the entire empire. So whenever a part of England came under was in danger, the Indian soldiers used to go there. So he gave great details in regard to how the Indian money was being drained away, and that was later on published in the form of a book, Un-British Rule in India, Britain's Un-British Rule in India. He called it un-British because he said Britain is known for its democratic approach. Britain is known for its sense of justice. Britain is known for rational approach. But what the Britishers are doing in India is totally opposed to what they are supposed to do. So Dadabhai Naoroji, in a way, became the basis, his theory became the basis of Indian nationalism. For the first time, our people realized that British rule was not a total blessing. Dadabhai Naoroji himself thought that it was a blessing, but he also pointed out the darker side, and when the Indian educated people realized that the British rule had a dark side also, nationalism grew in India, and therefore I always say that Dadabhai Naoroji's drain theory became the basis of Indian nationalism. For the first time, the educated people in India started realizing that everything that British people were doing in India was not for the good of people of India, that in certain ways they were exploiting the Indian people. The second name that I would like to mention in this connection is that of another great moderate leader, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, mentor of Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhiji always called him his political guru. When Gandhiji returned to India in 1915, the first thing that, and the month was January, the first thing that he did was went to Pune in order to meet his political guru, Gopal Krishna Gokhale. In fact, Gandhiji wanted to join a society started by Gokhale known as the Servants of India Society. But Gandhiji said, there is no hurry about it. You must try to understand India. You must try to understand the problems of the Indian people. So take a tour of the entire country, and then you may decide as to what you should do. So Gopal Krishna Gokhale, like Dadabhai Naoroji, studied every incident very carefully. He was a respected leader of India at the age of 35. He was called a senior member of the Indian Society. He became a member of the Bombay Legislative Council and later on a member of the Central Legislature of India. His budget speeches were thorough. He applied his full mind to the question of the budget and made very constructive criticism of the Britishers and what they were doing. Here I am reminded of a certain anecdote. The defense minister at that time of the British government in India was one Field Marshal Lord Kitchener, and he had presented the budget before the legislature, and then Field Marshal Lord Kitchener, the defense member, sent for Mr. Gokhale. Gokhale went to his chamber, and Field Marshal Kitchener said, Mr. Gokhale, will you please tell me as to what are the items of the budget speech that you are going to criticize tomorrow, so that I may come fully prepared. The trouble, Mr. Gokhale, is we can't answer your criticism. You are so thorough with the information that unless I prepare myself, I will not be able to answer your questions in the legislature. So that was Mr. Gokhale. He went to England 7 times, tried to educate the people of England vis-a-vis the problems of the Indian people, made several speeches, almost one speech every day. In fact, he addressed students of the Cambridge University also, and a speech in the Cambridge town. And Jawaharlal Nehru, in his autobiography, makes a mention of Gokhale's speech. So, visits to England, and then educating the people of Britain about the Indian aspirations. And there is just one more point that I would like to stress. He believed in best possible parliamentary traditions. His criticism in the legislature was always constructive, which helped British government without making damaging remarks. He took care of every word that he used. And on one occasion, he made a statement, public statement, which, as ill luck would have it, he could not prove. People questioned the authenticity of that statement, especially by the people in Great Britain. And Gokhale said, I shall try to find out whether I am the right or wrong. I made that statement on the basis of the information that I got from very reliable people of Pune. He went back to his city, contacted people, and he came to the conclusion that the information that was provided to him was wrong. And what did Mr. Gokhale do? He gave a public apology. That was the way in which he tried to lay down best possible traditions vis-a-vis governmental affairs, vis-a-vis political approach. And it was not surprising that Gandhiji considered him as his political guru, because Gokhale's approach to politics was one that we can call the ethical approach to politics. Now I shall refer to something else that happened before Mahatma Gandhi came on the political scene of India. In the 19th century, after the entire country came under the British rule, a movement was started among the Muslims known as the Wahhabi movement. The leader of the Wahhabi movement put forward the view, or propagated, that India under the British has become Darul Harab. That is, India is being governed by non-Islam people. And he said, our ambition is India should become Darus Salam, that India should become a country dominated by the Muslims. And therefore, he started a movement aimed at the overthrow of the British Empire. At that time, there was a wise Muslim statesman. His wisdom, of course, as ill luck would have it, proved rather temporary. He was all in favor of Hindu-Muslim unity. He was not in favor of the Wahhabi movement. In 1876, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, the great Muslim leader who founded the Aligarh College, later on which got converted into the Aligarh Muslim University, in 1876, he made a speech on secular lines. He said, we should all call ourselves Hindus because we are the citizens of Hindustan. I cannot understand the quarrels amongst us. We drink the water of Ganges and the water of Jamna. We eat the same sort of food. So there is so much that is common between the Hindus and the Muslims. And this great Sir Syed later on changed the tune of his song. The principal of the Aligarh college was a Englishman known as one Mr. Beck. Mr. Beck started brainwashing the aged Sir Syed. He said, Sir Syed, it's all right for you to talk about Hindu-Muslim unity, about secular ideas, but do you understand that so long as we are here, we shall protect your interests, that is the interests of the Muslims. Once we go away, the Muslims in India will be at the mercy of the brute Hindu majority, because there will be democracy in India, and then you will suffer because of the Hindu majority. So why are you supporting the cause of the Congress and espousing the cause of Hindu-Muslim unity? Then he changed the tune of his song, and he later on started saying, I don't understand why this organization, which has come into existence and which is known as Indian National Congress, why should it be called Indian National Congress? Does it mean there is only one nation in India? It is not true. Hindus constitute one nation, Muslims constitute another nation. Their habits, their approach to problems is different, and therefore I would advise Muslims not to join the Indian National Congress. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was the first person to talk in terms of two-nation theory, which later on became the theme song of Muhammad Ali Jinnah's lectures, and which ultimately led to the partition of the country. So it was because of Sir Syed's teachings that a Muslim organization came into existence in the year 1906. Surprisingly enough, Mr. Jinnah had nothing to do with Muslim League at that time. Mr. Jinnah was very much in the Congress. He was called the ambassador. Sarojini Naidu called him the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity, and Jinnah greatly respected Lokmanya Tilak and Gokhale. In fact, he defended Tilak in 1916 when charges were laid against him vis-a-vis sedition. That was after his release from jail. And Jinnah used to say that my ambition in life is to become Muslim Gokhale. This man who was supposed to be the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity, a man who admired Gokhale and Tilak. In fact, I may here mention one very good autobiography in English written by M.C. Chagla entitled Roses in December. And that's a very readable book. In that book, M.C. Chagla, who subsequently became the Chief Justice of Bombay High Court and later on Education Minister in Nehru's cabinet, in his autobiography says that though Jinnah drifted away from the Congress,
It's hanging, sir, from your end. We'll just try to correct that. Kindly stay put in. Just technical problem. It will be sorted out. We are here in the interesting phases now. One of the interesting phase of our freedom movement, how Muslim League tried to kindly stay put in. We're just trying to check as to where we have gone wrong. I think you have to come, sir. Check once what's happening here. Sir, we were away for some time. I think now you're back. Are you back, sir? Professor ji, are you back? Rajurkar ji, we are back. Hello, sir. Able to hear? Are you able to hear, Rajurkar ji? Is it okay, sir? Kalyani garu, are you there? Kalyani garu. Yeah. Just say hello, sir. We are all back. Rajurkar ji.
Shall I begin?
Yes, sir. From where you've left.
begin?
Yes. From where we left.
Okay.
Sir Sayyid.
Something went wrong.
Technically.
No, I was talking about. Yes, I was talking about the Lucknow session of the Indian National Congress.
No, before that, you are just trying to speak about Jinnah. How he tried to defend Dr. Gokhale.
No, I was talking about the founding of the All India Muslim League.
Yes. Please go ahead.
And yes, so the Muslim League, in the Muslim League session of 1906,
Yep.
a resolution was passed that Muslims of India should have separate electorates. The Muslim representatives of Muslim League met the Viceroy and made a request to that effect. And the Viceroy readily agreed because the British always believed in the dictum of divide and rule. So, separate electorates were granted to the Muslims as per the Act of 1909, known as the Minto-Morley reforms. Now, that was something very much to the disadvantage. Right.
Yes, sir.
Yes, that was something very much to the disadvantage of the Indian people, very much to the disadvantage of what we stood for. So we did not know what to do. Separate electorates became a part of Act of 1909 because the British were too keen about it in order to drive a wedge between the Hindus and the Muslims. In 1916, the session of the Congress took place at Lucknow, and at that time there was an agreement between the Muslim League and the Indian National Congress. The idea was to make a joint effort against the British, and this is known as the Lucknow Pact. Even Bal Gangadhar Tilak attended that session, and critics say that Tilak and others made a grave mistake by entering into a Lucknow Pact, and more so by agreeing to separate electorates for the Muslims, because scholars believe that one of the important reasons for the partition of India was the acceptance of separate electorates. But the dilemma before Tilak and others was, what should they do? Mr. Jinnah was also in the Congress as well as in the Muslim League. He went to Tilak and said, Mr. Tilak, what is the point in your opposing separate electorates for the Muslims? Because it has already become a part of the Act of 1909. Granting that the Congress opposes separate electorates, at this stage, the Muslims will become more disillusioned. They will leave the mainstream of the movement, and getting independence for the India would become all the more difficult. So the choice for Tilak and others was not between good and better, but between bad and worse.
Sure.
Accepting separate electorates was a slightly better proposition than opposing the Act of 1909, because Indians just couldn't have altered that act. So separate electorates were accepted, and many scholars believe that it paved the way of India's partition, but there was nothing that Mr. Tilak and others could do in 1916. Then I would like to talk about, at this stage, Gandhiji. Gandhiji returned to India in 1915 after a sojourn of 15 years in South Africa, where he carried on the struggle against racial segregation, and in a very novel way, in a very different way, a morally oriented struggle. On one occasion, when he was in South Africa, he said to his associate's name was one Mr. Polak. Gandhiji said, Polak, I know many people in the domain of religion who are politicians at heart, but I am in the domain of politics, and yet I believe in basic religious approach, and I am a man of religion, yet in the field of politics. So Gandhiji came to India, and he was not a well-known person at that time. Only the educated few knew about what Gandhi had done in South Africa. Jawaharlal Nehru writes in his autobiography that I met Gandhi for the first time on the eve of the Lucknow session. And my impression and the impression of younger people like us was not good, in the sense that we were not impressed by Gandhi. The words that Jawaharlal Nehru uses are, for us young men, Gandhi was distant, unpolitical, and not a person suitable for the political domain. But this person who couldn't impress the younger people, this person was not an orator. This person did not have a very striking personality. This person became the topmost leader of India by 1920. How did that happen? I cannot go on all the details, but I will just put it in a nutshell, because I had delivered 7 long lectures on Gandhiji, and I just can't talk about all those things. There are 2 or 3 things which were very out of the ordinary about Gandhi. Firstly, he was a man of great courage. Gandhiji used to say that there is nothing to fear except courage itself. Another thing very important about him was, I once read in the Thought for Today column in the Times of India that the evils in the world are not due to bad people. They are due to the timidity of good people. Those of us who call ourselves good are basically timid people, and that is the reason why evil triumphs over good things. Gandhi was an exception to that. He was far from a timid person, and he made the people of India brave. Always he used to say, what are you afraid of? The only thing that you must fear is fear itself, and let us oppose the British in an open way. Very briefly, this is what Gandhiji did. One, his moral approach to politics, which was unknown to the political field before Gandhiji came on the political scene, whether in India or elsewhere. What was the moral approach? As Machiavelli used to say, ends justify the means. We must gain power, we must gain our objectives, and the methods don't matter. The methods could be morally good, the methods could be morally bad. Ultimately, it is the objective that is important. Whereas Gandhiji said, no, I don't agree. The means are as important as the ends. He gave two examples. One was, he said, the means that you adopt in order to reach your goal are like the seed of the tree. And if the seed is defect, there will be a defective tree. The tree will not have a normal growth. On yet another occasion, he said, ends and means are like two sides of the same coin, and you can't separate them. So Gandhiji believed an ethical approach to political problems. People in the political field used to talk about moral approach to problems, but they never did what they said. One small example, Warren Hastings, the first Governor General of India, was tried by the House of Lords after we went back to England. And the allegation against him was he had followed immoral practices in the domain of politics. He had taken bribes and he had done many irregular things, and therefore the House of Lords tried Warren Hastings. Warren Hastings in his defense said, well, I did many irregular things, but I did all those things for the sake of England. I wanted British rule to continue in India, and therefore I had to resort to these immoral methods. Therefore I should be forgiven. A person who was listening to that debate, a great orator of England, one Mr. Fox, he stood up dramatically and said, my lord, I don't agree. What is morally wrong can never be politically right. But the irony of it was, Mr. Fox never practiced in his own political career this dictum of moral approach to problems. One, Frederick the Great of Prussia, he wrote a pamphlet condemning Machiavelli for saying that all sorts of means are permissible in order to reach political ends. Frederick the Great condemned Machiavelli as an immoral man, but Frederick the Great himself in his political life followed Machiavelli. Gandhi was the first person to adhere to moral principles in the political domain, and that was something extraordinary, something very different, something very new. Jawaharlal Nehru in 1956 visited Saudi Arabia. There he said something typically Gandhian. He said that the best result in a war is when no one is defeated. If my victories depends on your defeat, you don't keep quiet. You wait for the psychological moment and you hit back. So the moral approach ultimately paves the way for the elimination of strife. And because Germany revolted against Britain at the time of Second World War, because of the sufferings that they had to face after the First World War. Anyway, this was a very novel approach of Gandhiji. He started many movements. I will just make a passing reference to them. First movement in 1920, known as the Khilafat movement. Second movement in 1930 on the question of salt satyagraha. Third movement in 1940 when the Second World War had begun, which was known as individual satyagraha, because Gandhiji did not want to embarrass the British when the war was going on. And the fourth was the agitation that was started in 1942, the Quit India movement. But Gandhiji did not lead the Quit India movement. It turned violent, and therefore I shall attribute only the first three movements to Gandhiji. Here I may tell you that in a very, very true sense, the Indian national movement became a mass movement. I will not go into the details, just give an anecdote here and anecdote there to explain Gandhiji's approach. In 1930, when the salt satyagraha was in progress, the ambassador of Turkey to Afghanistan visited India, and the movement was in full swing. The jailer of a certain jail invited this gentleman, Hikmat Bayur, to a tea party. The tea party took place around sunset outside the jail premises. And Hikmat Bayur could hear the slogans of the satyagrahis. The slogans were Mahatma Gandhi ki jai, Bharat Mata ki jai, Inqilab Zindabad. The ambassador became curious. Ambassador to Pakistan, Turkish ambassador to Afghanistan. He asked the jail superintendent, he said, Mr. Jail Superintendent, how many people are in jails because of the movement that Gandhiji started? The jail superintendent said, he gave a certain figure, maybe 2 lakhs or 3 lakhs. Then the second question of the ambassador was, Mr. Jail Superintendent, how many people were in jails 10 years earlier when Gandhiji started the first movement? The jail superintendent said, sir, the number is much more now. It was 1/3 of the present number. The jail superintendent, the ambassador, in a rather mischievous mood, said, Mr. Jail Superintendent, how many people do you think would be in jails 10 years later, that is in 1940? Before the jail superintendent could answer that embarrassing question, one of the invitees to the tea party addressed the ambassador and said, Mr. Ambassador, sir, in 1940, even the jail superintendent would be in the jail. That was how the movement was spreading like wildfire. Everybody was caught up with that movement. In 1930, the Pathans in northwest frontier province, influenced greatly by Gandhiji's non-violent technique, took out a procession. The procession was fired upon. Men were killed. And what the processionists did was, they used to pick up the body of a dead person, carry it on their shoulder, and go ahead. And a time came when the ammunition of the soldiers, incidentally, the ammunition of the soldiers got exhausted. And the British commander said, now go on firing at these people. What the Indian soldiers did was, they laid down their arms and they said, sorry sir, these are our compatriots, these are the people belong to our own people, these are our own people, and we shall not fire against them any longer. That was how it was influencing the soldiers. ICS officers gave refuge to the underground people in the 1942 movement. Now the ICS was the strong pillar on which the British rule rested. One was army, the other was ICS officers, and so on. But even the ICS officers had become pro-independence at that time. Here I may say something which is not normally said. 2 great movements took place after, one in 1945, that movement was known as RIN Mutiny. The personnel belonging to the Navy, Indians, Hindus and Muslims, they rebelled against the British authorities. A sign of their patriotic impulse, a feeling in them that they were being ill-treated, and tricolors and other flags were flown on the ships, and the British suppressed it very cruelly. Now these people, the soldiers, the navy men, they too were influenced by Gandhiji's propaganda, Gandhiji's capacity to bring feelings of patriotism to each and every one. And the last thing here about that I would like to say is that Indian National Army was formed by Subhash Chandra Bose. Subhash Chandra Bose undoubtedly was a great man in India. During my earlier life, when I was a student, the topmost person, the person who was respected most, was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, and then came in popularity Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose. Nobody can doubt his patriotism, nobody can doubt his courage, the way in which he left India and went to other Asian countries and formed the Indian National Army. Now sometimes an impression is being given that the Indian National Army of Subhash Chandra Bose and the Royal Indian Mutiny brought independence to the country. I'm not saying that their role was unimportant, but the point that I'm trying to make is the feeling of patriotism spread all over India to the soldiers, to the common people, to the army because of Mahatma Gandhi, and this has to be remembered. And Subhash Chandra Bose knew that. I do not know how many people will know this, that Subhash Chandra Bose, in spite of his differences with Mahatma Gandhi, was the first man in India to call Mahatma Gandhi the father of the nation. And when the Indian National Army was formed, and when Burma came to the control of the Indian National Army, Subhash Chandra Bose declared 2nd of October as a national holiday. And one of his brigades was known as the Gandhi Brigade. So there was a close relationship between the two, and what Subhash Chandra Bose did was certainly very creditable, and all credit should go to him. But the point has to be remembered that the mass movement had created the groundwork for the work that was done by the Royal Indian Navy and by the members of the Subhash Chandra Bose Army. Just a few words about Jawaharlal Nehru, and then I will conclude. Gandhiji considered Jawaharlal Nehru as his political successor. Repeatedly he said, not Rajendra Prasad, not Rajaji, but Jawaharlal Nehru is my successor. He knows me better than others do, and I know him better than others do. Now I'm saying this because sometimes an idea is floated that Jawaharlal Nehru took the country in a different direction altogether. His approach was not very Gandhian, but that is not true at all. The first thing that I would like to say in this connection was Nehru moved from time to time very important resolutions in the various sessions of the Indian National Congress when we were dependent. And all these resolutions related to independent India's future. What we shall do after we become independent, or what approach we should follow in order to gain independence. I will give you just 2 or 3 examples. Example number 1, in 1927, Nehru moved a resolution in the Madras session of the Congress about future India's independent policy, future India's foreign policy. Imagine Nehru moving a resolution about India's independence, India's foreign policy 20 years before India became independent. In 1931, at the Karachi session of the Indian National Congress, presided over by the great Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who did so much for the integration of states after India became independent, Nehru drafted a resolution, the subject being fundamental rights and economic program. Gandhiji moved that resolution in the Congress session, and in this resolution, he laid out the details in regard to what the people of India would get, what sort of rights they would have, in independent India. So the Nehru's contribution could be divided into 4 parts, and I will not take much more of your time. One important part of his leadership in the pre-independence period was he extended the freedom movement to the Indian states, the princely states, because he was not sure that the princes would automatically accede to the Indian Union after India became free. And that exactly happened. The Indian National Congress extended its movement to the various states. Political consciousness was created in the subjects of the princely states, and they brought pressure on their respective princes to accede to the Indian Union. And that was the reason as to why, in a way, Sardar Patel's great task became marginally at least easier because of the political consciousness created by Nehru through by extending the freedom movement or political movement to the princely states. Number two, he developed an international dimension to India's movement for freedom. Nehru used to say that we must get the support and sympathy of other countries. Now, who are the other countries? He believed in getting the support of democracies and getting the support of those people who were under colonial bondage. Nehru used to say that India's movement for freedom is not an isolated phenomenon. It is a part of a larger movement against imperialism and colonialism. On yet another occasion, he said that other countries in bondage also should be interested in India's freedom movement because it is an integral part of a larger movement against colonialism. So he got the sympathy of the colonial countries, got the sympathy of the democratic countries because he said India stands for democracy and India has nothing to do with fascism or Nazism. In 1936, he refused to see Mussolini, the fascist leader, because Nehru was totally opposed to fascism. In 1938, Hitler wrote a letter to Nehru in which he said, I know your views about Nazism, and yet I want you to come to Germany incognito, if you want that nobody should know about it, or as my official guest, but I want you to see Germany for yourself. And Nehru turned down that invitation also. And the result was we got the support of the democratic countries on one hand and the colonial countries on the other hand. President Roosevelt brought pressure on Churchill, and he said, why don't you give independence to India? Because India stands for democracy. And when Churchill said, what guarantee is there that India will stand by democratic countries of the world? President Roosevelt was the guarantee is Jawaharlal Nehru, the president of the Indian National Congress. So this is in brief, because I say that Nehru created the roadmap of independent India's future in the pre-independence period itself. I can say, and insofar as Gandhi was concerned, I will say that he put Gandhian ideas within the framework of modernity. Ladies and gentlemen, I could have gone on like this, but there is always such a thing as constraint of time. All that I would like to say in the end is that we were fortunate to have very great leaders in the pre-independence period, and fortunately for some years after independence we had the good fortune of having them with us. Now it is our responsibility to take the cause of India further, and let us not let down our great leaders who fought for the freedom and the people who sacrificed their lives for the sake of freedom. I shall end by just one anecdote. There is a very beautiful, agonizing, emotionally charging essay by N.G.Rajurkar-Eminent, a great essayist. The title of that essay is The Unknown Warrior. After the First World War, the body of a dead British soldier was picked up from the battlefield and it was buried in the Westminster Abbey, where only the illustrious few are buried. The place where he is buried is known as the place of the unknown warrior. A.G. Gardiner, in his essay, moving essay, says, we do not know who this young man was. We do not know from which part of the country he came. We do not know everything about him. In normal course of times, he would have become a Gladstone, a Disraeli, or a great poet, or a great painter, but he didn't think in terms of personal aggrandizement. All that he thought was of England and its independence. Then he says, A.G. Gardiner says, I can imagine the unknown soldier taking leave of his family members. His aged parents are too shocked to talk to him. His wife clings to him and loses consciousness. His children stand bewildered, not knowing where their father was going. He doesn't have a second look at these people. He walked down the alley, goes to the battlefield, and he dies. A.G. Gardiner says, as his body is being lowered in the Westminster Abbey, I get a feeling that he's putting certain questions to him. He's saying in silent words, we died for no mean cause. We died so that you may live. We died so that England may be a happier and better place for those who live and those who come after. And then A.J. Gardiner imagines that I feel that the unknown warrior is putting this question to us in silent words, are you worthy of our sacrifices? And A.J. Gardiner concludes, if we are honest, we shall not find the answer easy. And that is the question that we should put to ourselves. Are we worthy of the sacrifices made by the people of India and its great leaders during the struggle? And let us say to ourselves and to the people at large, yes, we are worthy of those sacrifices. Thank you very much.
Sir, an 87-year-old octogenarian like you, really, you have reinvented India for us, the freedom struggle, and people, I hope everyone would understand the spirit of Constitution is our freedom struggle. How they fought and how they framed. So to fight that particular issue is nothing but the spirit of Constitution, whether it's rights or anything. So very well controlled, and the way you have ended, it really reminds us that are we honest? For that reason, to be honest with you, it's a small beginning, but with great patriot like you, at 87 years of age, if you have given us more than 1.5 hours time, it is nothing but to tell all Indians that let us imbibe the spirit of freedom struggle, and that freedom struggle is nothing but the spirit of our Constitution, to which we should all obey and respect. At the same time, as you rightly said, the fear is something. Gandhi was very categorical and clear. Fear, remove fear. That is why we have been saying, if we have to remove fear, our freedom struggle and our Constitution should be understood in toto, so that this fear will go away. Once this fear will go away, as you rightly said, that slavery, thinking of our minds, that as we are enslaved, that also falls apart. That will really help us live a better life. When we say we, because win at home to conquer the world, once we start doing that, it becomes easy for you, for us to transform this society. Sir, once again, I profusely thank you for your generous granting of time, and 1.5 hours is a not small time at your age, and the way you have connected the freedom struggle with so many happenings and with so many individuals who are fighting for the freedom is something which we will never forget, sir. I really profusely thank you on behalf of myself, Professor K. Purushottam Reddy, and also Principal Garu. Are you there? Would you like to add few words before we say bye to Professor Garu? Because I think he has given us enough time.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sure, I understand. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah. Speak. You can.
Yes. Yes, sir. So, I think it was a great learning experience for me, being a part of this wonderful platform of knowledge that has been initiated by you and given in such a very wonderful way, enlightening way by Professor Rajurkar Garu. Um, Sir has given a glimpse of the entire freedom struggle in one lecture. I think the entire glimpse, which tells about the sacrifices, bloodshed, every aspect of sacrifice that was made by our freedom fighters was visible to us like a live demonstration. Only, I think this is the prerogative of Sir and his great ability to connect with people at large. I think this is a great inspiration for us. And I would like to add what the architect of the Constitution of India, B.R. Ambedkar, has said that our Constitution is flexible, workable, and strong enough to bind the country together in peacetime and wartime. Whatever situation, the legal education about our democracy and constitution would make capacity building. And this is the need of the hour. I would like to also mention about Alexandrovich, an international lawyer, who introduced the concept of constitutional debates importance to us and how our courts are missing it in his monograph titled The Constitutional Developments of India. I would also like to mention the work which was initiated by Granville Austin in his book, The India Constitution, Cornerstone of a Nation, where he has mentioned about the importance of the constitutional debates. Our constitution was not drafted in a day or two. It was drafted for 165 days with all the debates on every aspect. It's a rich treasure which is preserved in our library, and we encourage our students to take a glimpse of it because the real knowledge lies in these debates, in the freedom struggle that has been the underlying aspect of the moral, ethical principles which were laid down by the great freedom fighters like Mahatma Gandhi and Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Sir has also introduced us to his the guru of Mahatma Gandhi. We generally highlight the successive attempts of Mahatma Gandhi, but Sir has given us a glimpse of his guru, his inspiration, Mahatma Gandhi's inspiration, which was really a great, a great new way of learning for all the students who will be really a privileged lot to know about it. And I would like to conclude by what Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru has mentioned. Failure comes only when we forget our ideals and objectives and principles. So the time has come for a younger generation to not bother only about marks, career aspects, but reach out and think that the success, real success, lies in being participative in the country and its development also, which automatically will transform how we see ourselves and how we see the future perspective of our country. Thank you so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity, and I thank Purushottam Reddy sir, who is a great guidance for us at our institution for organizing various academic events and giving us his knowledgeful inputs from time to time. Thank you so much.
Once again, in thanking Professor K. Purushottam Reddy, we are thanking Professor Rajurkar Garu, who happens to be his favorite student and working mate. Sir, thank you. Thanks to you and your family, your son, your wife, It is a wonderful opportunity. Because of their association and cooperation, we could make it a grand success. Hopefully, we will continue. Bless us, so that this will be a bliss for the people of India in knowing what freedom struggle and constitution are, so that they feel they are liberated souls. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Bless us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vijaya Kalyani garu. So this is for today. I hope we have made a beginning. August Kranti. So this August Kranti will continue. So as this inaugural lecture happened in again August, and that too by none other than our esteemed and revered, the best Indian political scientist, none other than Professor Rajurkar garu. So I hope India will imbibe the spirit of freedom, and the constitution is also understood in the same spirit, so that the fear is lost to fight corruption and to fight what is you feel it is really not worth for me or my family to take, so that the society also will become part of it, part of that movement. Take what the closing anecdote, the warrior, let us keep all those good things in our mind. When the warrior, how he made us to feel and think what we are going to be, how we are going to lead, how honest we are to those sacrifices. So let us again say, let us be honest to ourselves, so that all those sacrifices will not go waste, and whatever they have earmarked for us, let us really enjoy at the with the spirit of freedom struggle and respecting constitution, so we can that way respect each and every individual, irrespective of caste, creed, religion, region, otherwise. Thank you, sir. Take care. Have a great day. Thank you, Dr. Vijay Kalyani. Namaste.
Thank you.